All right, greetings everyone. Thanks for joining us for the first in our series of Friday forums. Today we're going to be featuring the candidate and challenger for the 2nd Legislative District here in Connecticut. We're pleased to be with Representative Raghib Allie-Brennan and his challenger Dan Carter, who coincidentally formerly held the seat there in the 2nd District. Before I quickly review the format, I want to, on behalf of the entire staff here at the Newtown Bee, take a moment to reflect on the tragedies that occurred on September 11th, 2001, and send our thoughts to the survivors, responders, and the families of those who were lost as a result of the 9/11 attacks. We just take a moment to reflect on that. All right, so this forum is going to provide each candidate an initial 2-minute opening statement. We did a flip of the coin, and Raghib Allie-Brennan is going to provide the opening statement. He will also provide the first closing statement. Then each question will allow each respondent up to 2 minutes. Then each candidate can have a 1-minute rebuttal, and then if necessary, each candidate can have a 30-second follow-up. Closing statements will be 1 minute, and you'll receive a 30-second warning when it's time, and then a stop warning when your time is up. Sorry about that. So yes, professional show business here at the Bee. So we're going to turn things over to the Newtown Bee's editor, Nancy Crevier. Nancy, it's all yours.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I hope all of our viewers are eager to hear all of the answers that we are looking for as well. This is a unique opportunity to get some insight from the two individuals that have both served the state, the 2nd District and Newtown, as elected members of the General Assembly. So let's get going here, and we're going to start out with Representative Allie-Brennan, please, with your opening statement.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm State Representative Raghib Allie-Brennan. I have the honor of representing the 2nd District, which includes my hometown of Bethel, part of Danbury, part of Reading, and part of Newtown. You know, when I ran for state representative in 2016 and 2018, I ran because I felt strongly that the community I love needed a seat at the table in Hartford and a representative who believes in representing all. After serving my first term for the last 2 years, I have forged strong relationships with legislative leaders on both sides of the aisle, and this is reflected in my positions as an assistant majority leader in the House of Representatives, as vice chair of the Energy and Technology Committee, and as the co-chair of the bipartisan Clean Energy Caucus. You know, over the past several months, we have dealt with devastating losses in our communities. Many have lost their jobs and are struggling to feed their families. There are going to be tough conversations ahead, and the 2nd District needs to keep its seat at the table and its voice in the room, and I'm the best person to do that. The months ahead will call for continued steady leadership, communication that is accurate and timely, and a full-time commitment. I'm so proud to represent the 4 towns of Connecticut's 2nd House District, and I hope to have the honor of being reelected to this position on November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just assert here, Raghib, when you're touching the table, you're getting movement on your camera.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
All yours, Nancy.
Great. Thank you, Representative. Mr. Carter, let's hear from you, your opening statement.
Thank you. And before I begin, John and Nancy, thank you for hosting this. It's important to have these conversations. And with the pandemic, we're not having many opportunities to, tell the people of the 2nd District where we're coming from. I too also had the honor of representing the 2nd District from 2011 to 2017. I was elected to 3 terms in the State House. And, the reason I went in the beginning really was similar to my opponents. I felt like we needed somebody who was truly representative of the 2nd District in the room. Now, when I was in the 2nd District in that position, I was on numerous committees, but the one thing I think I focused on the very most was trying to reduce the taxes, reduce the fees, and reduce the onerous regulations on small businesses. That was really pretty difficult in the last decade. And as a result, while we worked together and we actually did a lot of good stuff, 95% of the time we agreed in the legislature. And that 5% were the things that held this economy back from recovering. So here we are a decade later, and we're still doing the same thing. The high taxes have driven people out of the state. Jobs are nowhere to be found. It's really difficult. In fact, even in 2019, before the pandemic, businesses looked at the climate here and thought it was actually going to decline for us while the national average kept growing. And that's a real problem. And last year, they continued to raise taxes about $1.75 billion and increase spending once again. So the reason I'm going back to the legislature is really about bringing back that common sense element. I represent the district because I've always been very moderate. I've seen that even the Democrats have a hard time getting along right now because of the progressive agenda that's happening in Hartford and where we're going. I think that's not right for this district. And hopefully I can make a case during this forum and in the campaign why the folks should vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. I really appreciate both of you taking the time today to be with us. So let's get to the questions. And we're going to start with Representative Allie-Brennan. And we're going to start talking a little bit about something that affects Newtown. Since both of you know Newtown well, what are the most frequent concerns that you hear from residents in town? And how will you address them if the voters send you to Hartford in November? Mr. Allie-Brennan?
Yeah, obviously, I think the issues come down to bread and butter. It's people are really worried about their own pocket and small businesses. Obviously, I've been a great advocate for our small businesses in the state legislature. I've kept my promise to repeal the business entity tax, which was the first bill I introduced, a key campaign promise. We supported a balanced budget that increased the rainy day fund that put us on better footing during the pandemic. That was set to be rated by the Republicans who wanted to use that for transportation. And thank God that wasn't something that we did. But, working to protect small businesses and increase state support, is what I hear a lot from when I talk to families in Newtown. Just keeping our area affordable and bringing back as much as we can. And I think, I talk about that we've never really had a seat at the table, and I've been able to do that. I've been able to bargain to bring back more to our towns and for our schools. And that's just something that I know that a lot of our families have been looking for, and that now we're getting.
Mr. Carter, what do you have to say about concerns that you hear from residents?
Sure. Like my opponent mentioned just a moment ago, it is about bread and butter. It's about being able to afford to live in the state. As I mentioned, people feel the squeeze of the high taxes. People left the state, jobs leave the state. We watch our neighbors flee, and we kind of feel like we're left here picking up the tab. There's no question that's what's going on. Also, local control of schools and zoning is an issue. So let me handle the economy part first. We've seen for a decade now where we've had over and over again high tax increases, nickel and dimed. And even as my opponent mentioned, we tried to get rid of the business entity tax for years. And frankly, it was put in the last budget as part of a little, hey, here you go. This is something everybody wants. Then they turned around and they raised the business fees. They raised $50 million of taxes on small businesses across the state. So, at the end of the day, when you're looking at somebody who's going to work for the economy, what we need to do is we need to get a hold of the amount of taxes and not focus on the revenue side of the equation, but keep focusing on the spending side of the equation. We have an opportunity coming up where the no layoff clauses are coming up for the state employees. Let's start transitioning some of those employees or some of those services over to nonprofits and things like that where it makes sense. Let's do more of that. Let's reduce the amount of mandates on towns and schools that are costing them a ton of money. Like the agendas, the political agendas that my opponent pursues, like police accountability, which are going to have huge costs on municipalities. We can no longer afford that kind of politics at this point. Like coming into COVID-19, we're going to have a tough session where everybody wants to do something in the name of COVID. And I know when I'm there, I'm going to go back and I'm going to focus on reducing the mandates, reducing the taxes, and doing things that actually make sense. And I'm not going to be focused on, the numbers of dollars I bring back to the district per se, because right now they're taking more from our district than we get back. And that is a problem, and that's what we have to solve.
Thank you so much. Mr. Carter, you touched on a couple of things that make me want to jump ahead to some of the questions that we've already.
Do I get to respond to that though, or no?
Oh, God, I'm so sorry. Yes,
No
yes,
worries.
you may.
No, I mean, I would say with this budget, my first one, we did have careful cost controlling. The budget raised, spending across the state by only 0.3%, while supporting job training. And, a lot of that, some of that was, 900 million of it was the hospital tax, which is something Republicans have supported in the past and, helps with our hospitals. So, saying that there was this crazy amount of increase in spending is it's false.
Do I get to respond to that?
You get 30 seconds, yes.
Okay. First off, Republicans never supported the hospital tax. When we were up there, we fought against that tooth and nail. Putting that on the back of hospitals was a bad idea. So that's number one. Number two, the spending went up about 5% last year. And the point is that, that was the year where spending should have gone up. And you guys raised taxes about $1.75 billion on our consumers. People during the pandemic who went out to buy something from Carol Uzzi's that was pre-prepared, guess what? You spent more money on it. Mm-hmm. That meant, and right now everybody's talking about the revenue side again. So at the end of the day, we have to fix this. We've got to be honest about this. We have a spending problem. Last year was a perfect example, which is why 8 out of 10 businesses still believe that the economy in Connecticut was going to go downhill.
Okay. I think we can move on to another question now.
I'm sure we'll talk more about the economy.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm going to jump ahead to another question that we had. As Connecticut continues to recover economically from the recession of 2008 and this latest hit from the pandemic, can you talk about some of the ways you believe the state could generate more revenue while avoiding hammering the state residents with more taxes? And Mr. Carter, I'm going to let you respond first.
Thank you. Really, at the end of the day, the way the state raises revenue is by supporting the small businesses and supporting I'd say all the businesses across the state and getting people back to work. That's the only way we really can raise revenue from where we are right now. Now, if we find ourselves in a position, for instance, transportation, the Democrats have proposed tolls. Now, I know my opponent has stated that he'll stay against tolls, which is the right move. But across the state, we want tolls to fix our transportation. Instead, we should have been looking at maybe a weight distance tax on trucks or something like that. Like that would have been a way to legitimately raise revenue that would have gone directly to our highways from the people who are using them the most and damaging them. So those are the kinds of solutions we have to start looking at. What we can't do is turn back around and raise the taxes on small businesses at a point where we have to generate their revenue back into the state coffer, so to speak. Excuse me. So really, that is the answer. The answer is growing our economy. You can't tax your way out of this.
Okay, Representative Allie-Brennan.
Yeah, so as we rebuild our economy post-pandemic, we have to create structures that make it possible for all of us to participate in that economy. What does that mean? It means good, stable jobs, ensuring access to healthcare, quality education, and housing. And I'm going to continue to keep our fiscal house in order. My seat at the table gives the second district a powerful voice in that decision-making process. But, it really is about, workforce development. I think you're going to see in the next session that workforce development is going to become a big part of that agenda. And we have to invest more in that. I work with Boehringer Ingelheim. I've become a good friend to them in our area, making sure that our universities and our VOTEC schools have a real pipeline to the jobs that are here in the state. I know Republicans in the past wanted to cut $300 million from the University of Connecticut and would have killed workforce development in their budget. So I think we have to really look at making sure that we keep the workforce here.
Should I get to respond to that?
1 minute.
Okay. So with respect to workforce development, there's no question over my 6-year tenure, we tried everything we can to support VOTEC schools, all kinds of opportunities, especially places like Abbott Tech. Certainly we've supported the community colleges. Now, with respect to $300 million from UConn, $300 million needs to go away from UConn. UConn's budget at the time was very bloated. We pay those folks a lot of money. And at that time, we weren't getting everything back that we needed. So I think looking at UConn as the one place where somehow that's going to shut down workforce development is not right. You talked a lot about the things that we have coming up like hospitals and workforce development and all these nice programs. But at the end of the day, the things that are going to matter most are doing the things that help right here at home. Not pursuing some of the progressive agenda items like, taking away the ability for folks in our state to earn tips in their wages at restaurants. Like, we need to do things that matter most to them right now. And I know the programs are wonderful, and I'll support.
1 minute.
Hey, Representative Allie-Brennan, if you have any response.
I don't know how you could really go after our top university and if you're talking about being here, it's keeping those educated students here, making sure that they can work in these jobs, that we do have jobs here in the state. A lot of people are going to California and they're leaving. So it's making, kind of get more attractive to our youth, investing more in our transportation and we have good jobs here. So it's creating that pipeline, making sure that we're investing in that. So, we did a lot of that in the last budget as well with jobs funnel program, manufacturing pipeline initiative. There's a lot there. So I think we are doing the right things, and I think we should be investing more in that workforce development program, which would help, our businesses here in the state.
Thank you both.
Do I still get the 30-second?
Your second rebuttal, go.
Thank you. Nobody's going after UConn. And I was a huge supporter, and still am, of learn here, live here. Trying to create, Connecticut as being a place that my kids want to come stay and they don't have to live with me. That is a goal of mine, trust me. But at the end of the day, it's about the economy in the state, and it's too expensive to live here. And we keep doing things over and over that don't make sense. Even during the pandemic, what you did, you came to the governor, you said, listen, we don't want people to be evicted. We don't want that. Finish up later.
30 seconds.
30 seconds, Representative Allie-Brennan. Anything left? Or should we move on?
I know when the connection was a little unstable there, but that's fine. I think we have so many other things. It's not that simple. Obviously, we did more for our pensions in this last budget than we have in the past. Democrats are the ones who've been making the actuarially required contributions before Malloy. The previous governors didn't. So, it's not that easy. It's not that simple. We had to make the hard decisions, and that's what a lot of us go up there to do. So I'll leave it there.
Next question.
All right. Let's go on to our next question. The issue of whether or not Governor Ned Lamont can and will extend his emergency powers into February 2021 has been settled. So looking back to when the governor signed his first pandemic executive order, share with our Friday Forum viewers two things that you may have advised the governor to do differently since the COVID-19 pandemic hit Connecticut, and why you would give him that advice. Let's start with Allie-Brennan this time.
Yeah, sure. I've had contact with the governor's office. Obviously, we have a good relationship, and I've been working with him throughout the pandemic on issues that I've heard from my constituents. I've been helping with small business programs, Department of Labor issues. So I've been hand in hand with him there. Obviously, we've had concerns about reopening schools. I know from teachers and parents, we want to make sure that that's as safe as it can possibly be. I know New Milford just closed this week again because there was obviously a teacher or student became positive. So I've been talking with the governor's office in those aspects, specifically in regards to, making sure that people have relief really for our small businesses, making sure that there's as much programs as possible. I think he did a great job extending the $300 weekly for people who are currently unemployed. That's just been such a great lifeline. I've also worked with our law enforcement, with the governor, to make sure that they could have access to information about who is positive in their area, so they know when they're responding to houses or to calls, that they know what they're dealing with, and been working with him on that as well. So and then I think there's been issues on Kindlewood Lake. I've been in constant contact with him about a lot of the issues that have popped up. So to bring the big issues, I've just been there kind of every step of the way, prodding him and pushing him for what my district's been telling me.
Mr. Carter, what advice would you have for the governor?
So number one, I'll actually say that the governor has not done an awful job. Our governor, I stand behind Ed Lamont in a lot of the things that he's done. Now, the one caveat there I would say is, I wish that he would have actually involved the legislature more often And certainly here at the end, where they extended his executive order, the legislature should have stepped up to the responsibility and just did some sort of vote, not the panel vote, because, you know, I don't think Republicans really would have done much to curtail, but it's an important part of the process to show that the power of the people are involved in this as well. So that would be my only real problem with kind of the way he's done it. Now, the other thing is when I started to get to this a minute ago, we wanted to protect people from not being evicted from their place. That was important, no question about it, and still important. But one of the things that they did, which was a real problem, and my opponent was the one who urged the governor to do this, was that he would basically say you did not have to pay rent. He put it out there and said you do not have to pay your rent for 60 days, you know, on pass, which took away the ability for landlords to negotiate with their tenants, making it probably a bigger deal because now when the landlords at the end of this pandemic are even a greater financial stress than they would have been before. Like that kind of thinking was wrong. That was just heavy-handed and it just didn't make any sense to me. But by and large, looking at what Lamont has done, I can't say I have a problem. You know, there's a lot of, I would say, speculation or people getting upset about mask wear. You know, they're trying to pin it on Republicans right now. You know, Lamont was smart to mandate masks. I've spent my summer giving away over 1 million masks to people across the state. And I think we can still do those common sense things to get us back to an economy that we deserve again. I mean, it's getting people back to work safely, and that also means getting kids back to school.
1 minute rebuttal.
Yeah, I mean, I'll respond to that. I mean, it just shows how out of touch, you know, my opponent is. I'm talking to these people, you know, renters needed relief, and we also made sure that people who have mortgages could have some relief. It's not a fair situation for anybody involved, but also the CDC and the federal government has put a moratorium on renters as well. So, and to bring that by statute, a committee of 10 legislative leaders can, if they wish, effectively decide to override that decision, and that's with a mix of, you know, the Democrats and the Republicans, and they've chosen not to do that. So especially last week, you know, the committee of 10 decided to allow the governor's latest declaration to stand. So, and I'll point out that, you know, also in the past, you know, I mean, like I said, I've had an active role in advocating for a lot of these initiatives, but, you know, it also included expanding telehealth. And I remember, especially in the beginning, it was the list of essential businesses that I helped advocate with the governor.
1 minute.
For 1 minute? Okay.
Yep, you have a minute.
Well, I thank you for your work on telehealth. It's something that we've done for years, and I was part of doing that with the Public Health Committee many years ago. It's very, very important during this pandemic. Now, with respect to the renters, yeah, maybe you spoke to the renters, but you didn't speak to the landlords. Yeah. And that right now we have to have people working together. There's no question about it. With respect to the Legislative Committee of 10, you know, at the end of the day, legislators respond to or are responsible to their district. This was a point where legislators should have taken the reins, stepped up, and actually made the vote. I'm not saying, if you listen, I'm not saying they were going to stop him from extending it. There was no problem with that. I agree 100%. He needs that power to do that right now. And many of those Republicans do too. But we have people now who really care about what's going on, and they're watching a governor make all the decisions, and they need their representation, and they're not getting that.
30 seconds.
30 seconds for.
Yeah, I mean, they are getting it. I mean, some members who aren't speaking to the governor or don't have access to the governor's office or don't know how to communicate with the governor, maybe that's why they don't have that access. But they are getting it, and that's what we've done this whole time. So, I mean, I can imagine how us, the legislature, would argue about where money should specifically go and how long that would take for people who need relief right now. So I just think it's unrealistic for us to think that the legislature could handle those day-to-day issues that need day-to-day decisions. So
30 seconds.
And we're
I didn't say that the legislature should be handling day-to-day decisions. I said the legislature should be out there supporting their governor and deciding whether we're going to give him more power. Okay, so that's what I said. I'll go ahead and I'll reserve the time for later.
Next question.
On a little bit, talking a little bit about the Newtown Bee's recent diversity discussions. Those focused on social and racial justice in relation to policing, housing, and education. Mm-hmm. So starting with Representative Allie-Brennan, How would you address inequities raised by recent social and racial justice movements?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think, we had to deal with a major bill, the police accountability bill this summer. Over the last several months, the issue of police accountability and the ways in which, law enforcement engages with communities, particularly communities of color, has been at the front of our national conscience. The ways in which we respond will resonate for years. And, that was the hardest vote I've had to take. I've been and continue to be supportive of law enforcement and our first responders. And I took the time to speak with our chiefs of police, Newtown, Bethel, my friends who are law enforcement officers. And, I listened to the members of the community. I was at the rallies. I listened to, the anger and the frustrations from years of, systemic racism and just built up frustrations. And, the threat's consistent in every conversation, that the trust between law enforcement and many within our community is damaged, but not unrepairable. And that's why, the majority of our local law enforcement officers do good work. They are heroes and true community resource, but, we need reform. And, I think that reform will ensure a small number of bad actors can't discredit the good work done by the majority of, our good police officers. But I think obviously we have to look more at housing and other ways in which the system is really keeping some down. And that's why, I have been a representative of all and making sure that we're having those tough conversations for an equitable Connecticut.
Mr. Carter, would you like to
Sure.
talk a little bit about how you would address inequities raised by recent social and racial justice movements?
Sure. So, there's no question that we've seen across this country a distrust in police in many areas. There's no question about it. And there's always room for reform, and there's always room for better policing. The first people to tell you that will be the police officers themselves. One of the things that they desperately need and they've asked for is actually more funding and more money for training with respect to, basically basic defensive tactics, things like that. Because we have officers now who have never been in the military, they have very limited basic training, and what ends up happening is they rely on tasers and maybe escalate the use of force. That's just one thing they've asked for that's going to help them. What they didn't ask for was a bill that was supposedly going to go after a few bad apples, but actually went after all officers. And it put the officers in a very difficult position where they can be fired almost at random for any political thing, where the only place they can appeal is to the same board who fired them. It gets rid of consent searches, which really is a problem because that's one of the major ways we get guns and drugs off our streets. And it puts them in a chilling position where they're afraid because we've emboldened criminals over police officers at this point. So there were a lot of things in that bill that didn't hit home for Bethel, Danbury, Reading, and Newtown. That was the point. The local officers were giving good advice and the representative ignored it. That can't be done. And with respect to housing, in 2015, I worked very hard to get more affordable housing in Bethel. The problem is the way the housing laws work now, it's all predicated upon getting developers to come in and build more housing. It doesn't give us the opportunity to actually make housing that exists affordable and get deed restricted or whatever it needs to do. We're not doing the right thing to encourage homeownership here. And Allie-Brennan has actually furthered that by trying to take away our ability to even consider local character in zoning. It's part of the Progressive Caucus that he's a member of.
1 minute.
Your response?
Well, I'm not a member of the Progressive Caucus, but thank you. There are definitely many things I agree with in the Progressive Caucus. I'm actually part of the Moderate Caucus, but no, I mean, my opponent, he says that we do need reform in some aspects, and this has come up before. Police accountability isn't a new issue. He voted against a bill that would direct the Institute of Municipal and Regional Policy at Central Connecticut to assess and make recommendations regarding police training. So he's talking about police training, but he voted against bills that would just look at, is there better ways to do this? Excessive force in 2015. So I just think, it's interesting that he said that we should deal with this in a larger session. We know where your vote would stand. And I work with the police officers. I don't work for them. I work for the people. And the outcry and from many in the community, yes, I stand with the police. And at the end of the day, I did bargain them a better deal. On qualified immunity, I was one of the holdouts at the table, and we got them a better deal that wasn't as broad as it was. So those are the facts. And you voted against fair and equal housing in your past record as well. in this past session, although it was canceled, I introduced a bill with Beth Cavagna from
That's time.
address affordable housing issues.
1 minute.
So let's get to the Progressive Caucus. Let's get this thing out there, because I've been wondering like when it is you left the Progressive Caucus. In February 2019, you joined it. You signed on for school regionalization. You signed on for getting rid of local character with housing, increasing 830G laws. In fact, last year you voted for that. So I don't know when you became a moderate all of a sudden, but we can get to that later. Because right now your voting record shows that you have no ability to look at the economy and things that matter. That's my point. Now, with respect to police accountability, the bill you mentioned, 2015 excessive force, one of the major problems with that bill was it, and I'm on record saying this, it basically put people in positions where we're legislating based on color. So we can have a greater discussion about that later on, but there were some very ominous things in that bill that had nothing to do with really reducing excessive force.
30-second.
Well, it doesn't sound like any bill is perfect to you, and that's the truth. No bill is perfect. We compromise and we negotiate. When you're at the table, you have that ability. It's easy to vote no and complain, and that's what you've done, in your past. And, we can look at your record and the amount of votes you missed. You can criticize me all you want, but I go up there and I vote, and I take the hard votes, and I do that for the people. And we can talk about the Progressive Caucus. Of course, I'll sign into letters I agree on. Doesn't mean I'm part of the caucus. Have I attended some of their meetings to learn about legalization of cannabis and certain things like that are affecting our communities and here now? Sure. I have my mind that I'm open to. So I'm open to everything and listening to all sides.
30-second follow-up.
Sure. Well, I encourage everybody to go look at what I like to call my Progressive Manifesto, the Progressive Caucus. It's out there with Allie-Brennan's name at the top of it in February 2019. And that's fine. The only point I've been making is that right now, progressive and Democrats are even having a hard time getting along sometimes. With respect to going up there and getting things done, I've got an excellent bipartisan record of not saying no. I've said yes about 95% of the time with the Democrats. We agree on a lot. It's the 5% that are major issues.
Next question.
We're gonna move on to a subject that's a little bit different from what we've just been talking about. We keep hearing how the nonprofit agencies serving our most vulnerable residents here in Newtown are in crisis due to a lack of funding, putting those that they serve in an even more precarious position. What will you do in the State House over the next 2 years to help better support our nonprofit agencies? Mr. Carter, let's start with you.
Right. So one of the major things is exactly what I mentioned a minute ago, where we have an opportunity now with the state no layoff provisions, things like that expiring with state employees, that we can look at opportunities to give some of our services to these nonprofits. Now, I'll also say that we're going to have to encourage competition among those nonprofits to make sure that we're not duplicating effort or anything like that. But I think we have a huge opportunity to help those groups, help the people that matter most in this state. And I think that's our path forward.
2 minutes.
Yeah, and I'll still add that, through everything I've done, I've been transparent about it. My voters know why I vote for things, how I vote, what I'm thinking before, during, and after a vote. So I'll leave that there. But yeah, I've been working with a lot of our nonprofits, Ability Beyond, and many. I know they face a lot of struggles. There's a lot of red tape for some of them that we're still trying to cut through. And I guess we really do have to build a better partnership, post-pandemic to address those needs and those issues. I know we can't really just hope that, enough charity donations come through to help these nonprofits, but we really have to become better partners moving forward. And that's something that I'm committed to doing.
Rebuttal?
No rebuttal.
Very good. Next question.
All right, well, that kind of wrapped that one up pretty quickly.
Sometimes there's agreement.
There's been a strong response regarding vaccination requirements for school children. What is your stance on this issue? Starting with Mr. Allie-Brennan, please.
Yeah, this has been a big issue that we've been debating. I believe in science, and I know I've met with some Newtown residents specifically on this topic. I lean towards, the science. And I think that some of the bills we've saw have been a bit too broad. And I think we need to look at the issue in a better stance. I don't think we can react so quickly as we were trying to in the past session. But I do believe that, some of our students need to be vaccinated. We saw an outbreak in the Reading area as well, some of our schools. So I think that moving forward, that's something that we should be looking at.
2 minutes.
So.
Okay, so I also believe in the science. I spent about, I'd say 15 years in healthcare. I started out as a chemistry major in college even, so I do believe in science. And right now, the science says that the school's still out on what we should be doing with respect to vaccinations. When the Department of Public Health and the Democrats were really pushing for mandatory vaccinations, some of their data was flawed. I'd like to see that come forward, because I do support people having choice in their healthcare, including vaccinations, but I really would like to see the data that came forth, because what was happening, they were counting kids who didn't have one vaccination as unvaccinated. And at the end of the day, if you have a certain level of vaccination or kids who have vaccinations in a community, you do have herd immunity. You're not going to be at risk for these things happening. I'm feeling at this point, though, we're trying to push this issue to a point where we're just, attacking the religious exemption. We're attacking the folks who don't want to have their kids vaccinated. So at the end of the day, we need to find out what the data is. And I say the first thing we do is we work with education. We educate people what the science is. We educate people what the benefits of vaccinating their children are. I don't think we're ready for mandates yet. I really don't, but I'd be willing to listen and learn more about that.
Follow up?
Yeah, well, I think we just need to really strengthen the medical exemption. I don't think that there should be some religious exemption. I think people obviously use that to circumvent, getting their kids vaccinated. So I do think that the bill should be focused on making sure that if a student really, cannot have something that, and I know that obviously doctors don't really give out these medical exemptions because they're afraid of being sued or, God forbid something happens. But, how can we make this better so that parents are actually doing the right thing by vaccinating their children, and not circumventing the rules just because of some fear by the government or something like that. So,
1 minute.
So listen, I understand, some people feel like they're skirting the issue with the religious exemption. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, this isn't about whether it's a medical exemption or really a religious exemption. It's about the fact that parents do have some choice on how they treat their children. Like, we have to remember that they're educated people in this area. In our communities especially, I think a lot of people are very, very educated and know these issues, okay? And they can believe in the science too. I'm just saying we need to educate people the best we can, and we need to let them make a decision. That's the key to solving these kinds of issues. It's not a heavy-handed down approach where, it's kind of gets back to everything else we do. Local control of zoning, local, you're forcing school regionalization, all these sort of things where people in our community and our parents and our teachers, they know best as to what's good for our communities. So that's why I want to see this done through education and not mandates.
Last question.
Oh, I think we have 30 seconds for rebuttal from.
Yeah. I just, the Department of Public Health reported that there were 134, schools in Connecticut, that were fewer than 95% of students that were vaccinated for measles in 2018 and 2019. So I know the CDC says that the 95% threshold is, recommended. So to maintain the herd immunity. So, I believe in the CDC and making sure that we can do that. But obviously, if there's too many loopholes here, we need to make sure that these kids are getting vaccinated. And so I support, that.
What do you support? I give it 30 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Do you support mandating them and telling them to do it? Or do you support educating these people and giving them the opportunity to understand why measles vaccine is important?
I think it's a balance of both, obviously, but I think that, like I said, I think that the medical exemption needs to be stronger. I don't think that people should just be able to jump to the religious exemption and that's it. I think let's give the real people who really need a medical exemption that possibility there.
Thank you.
Last
Thank
one.
you. We're going to, there's so many subjects that we could talk about here, but here's something that might be of interest to both of you, especially. Voting in person and voting by mail are both presenting challenges for this year for voters.
Yep.
What advice would you give to your constituents or potential constituents as they go to the polls this November? Representative Allie-Brennan first.
Sure. Well, I was proud to vote for, the measures that we took this summer to make sure that people can vote safely and securely this November. In the past, I've also voted for early voting. Unfortunately, the Senate couldn't capture the 3/4 vote needed for some of those measures, like no excuse absentee, which we could really use right now. But so in the September session, in the July session, we voted to make sure that there could be that there was an excuse. The pandemic can be an excuse to vote early through absentee. And so next week, you'll be getting an absentee application from the Secretary of State's office. If you fill that out, you can mail it in, and there's a barcode, so you can follow your application to the town clerk. You can put it inside a box outside of town hall, or there's several ones if you live in a city, which I prefer you do. Obviously the United States Postal Service, there's some questions going on there. I think it's better just to put it in the secure box. You can do that as early, and then you should be getting that in early October. The ballot should be mailed out. So obviously that's the most safe and secure way. I have nothing against people going and voting in on the day of November 3rd, but obviously, we really want to look out for our seniors and people who have medical conditions and want to vote safely and securely. And so this is a way to make sure that everybody can participate in the most important election probably in our lifetime.
2 minutes.
Thank you. So
30 seconds.
with respect to the absentee balloting, first off, I also believe absentee balloting should be no excuse. I actually supported that years ago, and we should have no excuse absentee balloting. I mean, anybody who can't make it to the polls should have that opportunity, period, dot, end of story. Now this year, one of the big problems with absentee balloting is the fact that the Secretary of State and the governor sent them out to every person. That is a problem in this state because we have absentee ballots going all over the place to people who haven't requested them. That's my only gripe with the system, because we saw in the primary, there were a lot of people who did not have their votes counted. Either they mailed them back to themselves because the envelopes were messed up, they got the wrong ballots, and some people just didn't get them in, or didn't sign them. So absentee balloting is really, really important, and I think we've kind of overloaded the system the wrong way. Now, with that said, you're going to get your absentee ballot in the middle of this month. They've started going out on the 8th, and they're going to go out, I think, through the 15th. Or your application. When you get your application, if you're a senior or somebody, or just you're not going to be in town, fill it in. I agree with my opponent there, where you take it in and you put it in the box. Not because there's any problem with the Postal Service. Our Postal Service is great. I got no issues, especially right here in Connecticut. But they're going to get a lot of ballots in. It's the best way to make sure it gets there, and get it in there as soon as you can. So again, there's no problem voting in person. They've done a great job, even we saw during the primary, allowing people to vote in person. I'm going to vote in person. And the people who have concerns, or you're elderly, or you have a comorbidity and you're at risk because of COVID, I think you should vote absentee.
1 minute follow-up.
Yeah, there weren't that. I know that after the primary, there were obviously some little glitches, but there weren't that many that, many people had anticipated. And I think that with even if you're getting a ballot, even though requested the application, I think it's still important, because obviously some people have no idea. But either way, even if you submit a ballot application and you go in, they still cross-reference that. So there's no way that people can, vote twice or things like that. It's all cross-reference. But just wanted to point that out. 1 minute.
And I'm not saying that people are voting twice. I have a lot of faith in our town clerks. I really do.
Yeah.
I know that there are people who try to fraud the system. It happens. I'm not saying like in Connecticut we have that. What I'm saying is that you're going to have a lot of ballots that are going out to people who didn't ask for them. It's going to be really easy for them to fill them out for somebody else. That's going to happen. It's what it is. I also believe that we've overloaded the system for the town clerks at this point. So if you can vote in person, I think it's a great thing to do, because we've overloaded it with this. Here in Bethel alone, right? They probably are going to have 9,000 people voting by absentee ballot. That's a lot of people, and it's very difficult. So I would say, do it early. Get it in the box out there. The absentee ballots go out October 2nd. So like as my opponent said, early October. So look for it in your mailbox.
Either 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'll just add too. I know a lot of people are anxious to get their applications. You should wait till the Secretary of State's office sends it. Instead of printing it out, it's just easier for our town clerks. Let's be conscious of and kind to them. But these are going to have easier access for them to keep everything all together. So wait for it.
30 seconds.
Carter?
No, I'm perfect agreement. The town clerks have had a tough time. I've also been in touch with a lot of the town clerks, and yeah, wait for your ballot. If you don't get it, 15th, 16th of the month, or you're getting excited about it, you still got time. Go ahead and print one off, but wait for it right now because they're working really hard. Don't call the town clerk's office, right? Don't call them.
Yes. You can call me though, or Dan. So.
All right, I think it's time for us to move into our closing statements.
Yes.
Is that where we're at, John?
1 minute.
1 minute for a closing statement, and we're starting with Representative Allie-Brennan, please.
Okay. Well, it's been a while since my opponent had the privilege of representing the people of the 2nd District. In the 4 years since he abandoned them for what he thought would be greener pastures, a lot has changed in this country and in the 2nd District. The people of this district don't have time for the partisan games and, baseless attacks about being progressive or, stoking fears about riots starting in P.T. Barnum Square, and they don't have the luxury of moving backwards. They want and need results and leaders who can work across the aisle to bring them results, and I believe in finding common ground and making connections, not exploiting divisions. I stand by my record of doing just that, because the people of the 2nd District want answers and solutions, not typical partisan attacks. And as I've said, the country isn't in the same place it was 4 years ago, and neither is the 2nd District. I think the voters have a clear choice to make. We can move forward in a spirit of collaboration with a commitment to service, or we can move backwards and once again embrace the spirit of division and negativity. The same characteristics that create and encourage hatred and fear. I don't think that's who we really are. And hopefully on November 3rd, you'll prove me right. So thank you.
1 minute.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I totally agree with my opponent there on a lot of that. I have a bipartisan record. I always have. I didn't ever play into the politics of fear. I call people out on the issues that they vote for. And, I served this district honorably for 6 years. As far as my greener pastures, yeah, I took an opportunity to maybe try something where I thought I was needed and elevate the argument there and elevate what was going on at the time. And I also get the opportunity to be with my son and my daughter. My son is a senior at the University of Tampa. I spent a lot of time playing lacrosse or watching him play lacrosse and earning money, starting my own business and doing some things that I thought were really important. And now I see that, the district isn't the same place. It's worse. The same problems we had going into the last decade, where we lost a decade of opportunity, are still here. So I'm coming back. I want the opportunity to represent the district in a moderate, honest, fair manner. I never mince words with what I'm doing, and I've got a good voting record to prove it. So I hope they'll support me on November 3rd.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you so much for sharing with our viewers a few of your insights. And I'm sorry, could have gone on, I think, for another hour.
Yeah.
But we appreciate the time that you did take to be with us today.
Thank you.
Appreciate you doing it.
We also want to remind everyone that we'll be back over the next 3 Fridays. Our next Friday forum segment will incorporate our Senate candidate, Michelle McCabe in the 28th District, and incumbent Republican Senator Tony Huang. That's going to be a week from today at noon. That'll be followed by a Friday forum with the 106th District Representative Mitch Belinsky and his challenger, Rebecca Harriman Stites. And then we'll be wrapping up on the day that people will be able to begin voting by absentee ballot on October 2nd with the unchallenged Republican from the 112th District, J.P. Stradzinski. And we're also planning on doing a Friday forum with our registrars and our town clerk to help coach people that may have questions or issues regarding their balloting process, whether they choose to do it by absentee or in person. Thanks so much.